Hello friends, welcome to Data Pandit. Today we are going to talk about how Abinitio can integrate with the AWS. So most Abinitio projects tries to utilize the storage capacity of cloud vendors like AWS S3, GCP or Azure Blob Storage. Like in this session we are going to see how we can configure our Abinitio environment so that it can interact easily with the storage locations of AWS, which is mainly is S3. So we are going to mostly talk about S3 as a storage. So we know that we can use the EC2, RDS, Redshift, all those other AWS services using Ab initio. Okay, but today's focus is to interact with the S3. So um, most of the Ab initio projects try to utilize the storage capacity of cloud vendors. Like because if you talk about S3, so it's a huge, it's very scalable. It's durable and it's a highly available. It's an object storage. You don't have to mount it. Okay, and also S3 can be integrated with multiple other other software or other projects. Okay, other tools basically. So the Dramium for data analytics, or also on top of that, there could be multiple. Redshift itself can be read the data from S3 and all. So we, as an Ab initio projects, try to interact with the S3, read the S3 data, or probably process the ETL in Ab initio. The computation is still lies with the operating system or Ab initio projects or Ab initio node as node servers, but the storage we can try to write it to S3 or read from the S3. Okay, and other tools or technologies can interact with S3 there on. Okay, so let's see how we can configure the access to Amazon S3. So there are two things here. First of all, the Java must be there. So we know that Java automatically comes up with the operating system, but Java 8 plus is necessary. That too comes in the latest versions of the operating system, or it comes with it. So there is no issue in that. So the second part is to configure the access credential. So there will be a multiple ways of doing it. I mean, there could be multiple ways of creating the access credential files. You know, the sequence of the job which interacts with S3 or any other storage service of cloud, it tries to see the access in multiple files in succession, or wherein it finds first, it tries to take those credentials and tries to access the respective storage location. Okay, whether it's an Amazon S3 or whether it's in a GCP for Google Cloud Storage, or it could be Azure Blob Storage for Microsoft, cloud. So there are three ways. It could be a default credential provider chain. The meaning is, or the job which interacts with the storage services, it tries to see the credential file in default locations, whether it's a Java properties file or environment specific configuration file, and so on. And second is, we can provide AWS credential profile file, okay, with named profile, meaning there will be a one profile file and there will be a multiple profiles within that. So we are going to see how the content would look like. For example, there could be a multiple AWS accounts or multiple AWS buckets. Let's say if we try to connect with the different profiles, access profiles, then we can create all those access profile within single file, and the profile file can be created, and we can try to access the specific profile file using that name of the profile. Okay, and then there is a multiplexer file. So we know that this is also another profile to provide the access credential therein. Okay, so we know that there are vendor specific component and also the file components like input file or output file or read multiple files or write multiple files. These are the components which can be used to interact with Amazon S3. Okay, that is called the file based component. So if we try to use those components, then these are the two ways we can provide the access there in these files, and those components can try to utilize those files, okay, and try to connect to the Amazon S3. So, but if we uh, sorry, if we try to access the vendor specific component, then we can use A and B, and if we try to use file components, then we can use all three. Okay, so the multiplexer file is another access credential provider file, wherein we can provide the file and we can specify the path over there, and that can be used. Okay, so first, we will try to see in detail about these things. But before that, let's see what multiplexer is. So multiplexer is the Java process, in fact. So, what does multiplexer do is to interact with the Apache Hadoop compatible file system. When I say Apache Hadoop SCFS file system is, so the Hadoop system, SDFS or Google Cloud Storage or S3 and all, blob storage of Microsoft, all are those, compatible with the SCFS. So multiplexer's job is to tries to interact with that, and second is in containerized job, right? The if we are Docker container or Abinitio job is running under containerized job, in the Kubernetes and all. Okay. So if it is in a containerized job, then the to calculate the resource required for a particular job, right? So if in a containerized application, there could be multiple jobs, depending upon the requirement of the resource. We have to have the prior calculation of the resource required, then multiplexer do that job. Okay. So there are now we'll look at the couple of parameters, Benicio provided parameters, wherein what is first is called AB job mux configuration, which is the path of the multiplexer file basically. So herein we can provide the path of the multiplexer file, and multiplexer file can be created to override the properties of the default credential file, or we can provide multiple more parameters, key value parameters over here. We will see how the multiplex file would look like in some time. And then there is an AVMux URI scheme. This is the protocol which are file protocol which are compatible with the SCFS. So here we can provide those. So as an ab initio administrator who is responsible for providing the access or setting up the access pattern for AWS, can be uh, you know uh, can read through these parameters and try to configure those parameters to provide the access for the respective development team. So now let's see how these setups can be done. So first we are going to see the default credential provider chain. So if we talk about default credential provider chain is, so whenever any ab initio job which tries to interact with the storage S3 storage or any other storage, cloud storage, so it is going to see the credential in the default credential profile. So if it doesn't find there, so it will go for the other specific file, let's say credential profile file, or maybe if it is in multiplexer file, those kind of path it will be following. Okay. So if we talk about a Linux platform, so this local this file would be there in the home.aws and credential. And if we talk about Windows platform, so this is going to be here. Okay. So let's see how to configure this, AWS configuration can be done in any platform. Let's say I have a Windows machine, right? So I would be showing how we can configure it. So let's see, I'll use my Windows PowerShell. So let me open it. 1 second, let me, I'm not going to use the Windows. I'll go just open it. Okay. Okay. Okay, there are multiple things over here. So let's see. I mean, what I am going to do is I will going to configure my Windows machine to connect with the uh, AWS account. So I have created an AWS account which is already there. Okay. So okay. So to try to configure this environment, so I will go to the IAM management console dashboard. So if you look at the dashboards here, in you can go to the manage access key. So if so, manage access key will give you the access key and password. So let me create the new key. Okay, one key is already there, so which I have created some time back. You can create another key. Okay, so if you create another key, you can understand it, and just so this is going to be the access key and password. Okay, so let me download it. So I have I think I need to remove it. Let me remove it. So I'll download it again. So now I can open it. So if you open it, so you will have access key and secret access key. So access key is kind of so username and password basically. So I have copied it. Let me run some command. AWS configure is the command. AWS configure if you are running and press enter. So it will be asking the AWS access key. So I again need to provide it. Second parameter is asking is AWS secret access key. So if you look at the this one, so the second value is for secret access key. Okay, that also you provide. And region I'm not going to provide, and the default or format is also not provided. So these are the default. I am not going to provide it. Okay. So if I look at .aws here, you can see okay, in within the AWS I have a credential profile, right? So cd.aws, and if I do dir, then let me see creden. See, these are access key, connection 2 or connection 3. So this is the pattern. This is the it's kind of become the named profile, default connection 2, connection 3. So I can create multiple things, okay, over here. So this is how the this will be looking like. Okay, so for our case, what is this is DFN. This one is our default one. Okay, so this how it looks like to create the default credential file. Okay, similarly we can create the named profile. So this also will look like this. So, these are the named default profile, and then you can customize it. So if I have multiple keys or multiple accounts, then you can use that. Okay, let's okay. So this is how we can connect it. So let me try to access the S3 locations. Basically I have a command actually. So let me go here. So let's say I will run S3 command to see the buckets. So AWS S3 LS S3. So this is the this is the object actually. Okay. So if I run this, so I have these buckets actually. So if I do it, so this API gateway Mumbai, right? So if you look at in my account, so I'll go to the S3 storage. And if you look at the buckets, right? API gateway Mumbai, AWS Athena query results, okay, and data panel, these kind of buckets I have. So all are listed over here, okay. So if you can do the bucket also, you can provide the bucket here. copy and paste. So you can see the file within that. So if I go back and see what is the file in that, this is new year 2023 text. Okay, new year. So this is how you can access. You configure your pattern here, configure your credential here. So my what I can do, I can my or like or let's talk about the operating system is installed in my machine, let's say. So I my machine can interact with the Abinitio, right? Sorry, my machine can interact with the AWS storage. So likewise, if I have an operating system installed therein, I can configure using the AWS configure as same you can give the credentials. Okay, and credential can be taken from the administrator, right? Who has the AWS provider actually, basically who governs the access and all. So you can take the access, you can configure your environment and then try to interact with. So I have shown you how we can interact with after setting up the credential. Now look at the few more concept over here in further. So this is how the default configuration file can be created, and also named profile. So this is also a named profile in the sense of, like we have seen, right? There is a default and there will be a custom, or there could be a multiple actually. You can create a custom to or connection to, whatever name you can give. Okay, and then the same button. So why these named profile is like within same profile you can manage multiple accounts or multiple buckets, and so multiple connections basically you can manage. So this is also a file you can create it. Okay, other than the default one, you can create another profile and you can specify that profile path in the configuration, and this will be used to interact with the vendor specific component as well as file components. Both can be used. So now have a look at the multiplexer file. So two things we have seen: default configuration file. When we configure it in the default path location, the credential file is going to be created and the same can be used. And second is you can provide another profile path, and named profile can be created over there. Third is multiplexer file. This is an XML file. Okay, so this is how the multiplexer file look like. Is why we use multiplexer file is for S3, for file components basically. If we don't have any access for this in default as well as in the named profile, so it will be looking for the multiplexer file. Okay, which is provided by this path. Okay, so we can create a multiplexer file, we can save it somewhere in the location, and we can provide the path over in the AB Zomix configuration, and the credential can be taken while interacting with the S3 storage via the Ab initio graph. Okay. So if you look at the multiplexer file, this is an XML file, normal XML file. Okay. The properties is one property like access key ID, and then you will give the value, and X secret key you give the value over here, and then there is an S3 endpoint URL. So if your S3 storage is in on-prem, I mean S3 storage is there in AWS, and you want the storage to be accessed from on-premises server, right? So there will be endpoint URL. So there will be a URL given by the cloud vendor to you, so that you can provide that URL, and through that URL you can access this S3 bucket location. There could be multiple more properties which are related to S3 can be specified over here, like multi-part, multi-part. So what happens is when we have huge S3 storage, okay, to load, let's say we are storing huge file into the S3, and what we can utilize is we can utilize the multi-part functionality, so that the storage itself, I mean the file is itself is divided into multiple chunks, and those chunks in parallel can be loaded into S3. So that is called a multi-part load actually. And the connection timeout, these are the different other properties we can set up here in the multiplexer file. Okay. So this is that. So why? Now we have understood, right? So we have to have Java. We know that, and we will be getting by default mostly in latest version of Abinitio. And second is configuration. So any either of these three can be done, or if it is all things are done, then successfully using the default chain, it is going to be see the credential and try to access the components. So let's see how different what are the different components basically. So if you look at the if you look at the try to Evancio try to interact with S3 is using the input file component, read multiple file component, or read parallel or output file component for writing the data, or write multiple file component. So these components can be used, okay, to interact with the S3 bucket. You can download S3 bucket and you can upload this, create the file, and you can upload that file into the S3. Now let's look at the few example of S3 command can be used, right? So I said the listing AWS S3, LS and S3, right? And you can give the bucket name and then the respective folder you can reach up to the level of file, okay, while giving the AWS S3. If you want to copy the file from one bucket to another, you can use this, okay, AWS S3. Okay, and for copying from one bucket to local path, that also can be used, or from removing the bucket path. Let's say I want to remove some file, so I can use the AWS S3 RM. Or if you want to upload the file from the local to the bucket, these are called S3 CLI command, command line interface command. So you can use both ways. You can use the command line to do that, or you can use the ab initio to upload the files. Both ways can be done. So these are the these also can be used m underscore ls, okay, okay, to access the file and all. So we can use read multiple files and write multiple file components for reading and writing data to S3. So if you look at the read multiple file component or write multiple file components, there will be a parameter called config file. Therein we can provide the multiplexer file name, okay, or you can provide the AWS credential file name. So you create the credential file, you can provide there. So whichever component is comes up with the config file, so that therein you can provide that, okay. But input file, output file, these components doesn't come with, so they are going to look into the AWS, let's say, default credential file, or AWS named profiles, okay. Mostly I mean AWS default credential provider can be used by the input file and output file component. Now, so there are multiple vendor specific components. When I say vendor specific component is, they directly use Amazon S3 API. So they will use the S3 API directly. There is a, because there are vendor specific components. They are meant for AWS storage access, right? So therein you will find that there is a parameter called credential provider. So herein you can provide the profile. You can provide the default. If you say the default, then the access can be looked in here, okay. If you provide the profile, if you provide this, there are two values of this, okay, default and profile, okay, some profile file, I think. If you give the profile, then there it will be another two more parameter will come, which will say that what is the name of the profile and what is the location of the profile. So this kind of parameter will be there here. So while giving those parameters, you can access the S3 subscribes. S3 subscribe is just reading the data from the S3 location, okay. S3 publishes to publish the data into the S3 bucket, okay. Base S3 subscribe is used for base graphs basically. S3 subscribe is only for continuous graphs, but that too, I mean, you have to read the data from one bucket itself, okay. I use, and the control of compute point and a check point can be done using the S3 subscribe itself. That can be governed, okay. So this is all about how S3 can be accessed using the AWS graphs. So when you design the graph, you can use any of these components, read multiple file component, you give the bucket path, and you can read the multiple file and you provide the configuration file for connectivity. You any other profile like we do for any other storage, let's say Hadoop storage or any other multiple files reading storage. you know the legacy in the sense of operating system storage locations, right? And similarly, we can if want to write the buckets, the files in within the bucket, we can use write multiple file components. We can provide the config file. Okay, and we can provide different parameters. We can provide the bucket name, where to write the files and all. Okay, so this is can be used. So thank you so much. Please subscribe my channel and share it with other. Thank you so much.